The espresso machine hissed like a warning I should have heeded. I'd been working at Cafe Marcello for 3 months. Long enough to recognize the regulars, short enough that I still noticed when something felt wrong. Tuesday nights were usually dead, just me, Paolo in the kitchen, and maybe 2 tables nursing cold cappuccinos while pretending to read. Tonight, every booth was full. Not with the usual crowd. These men wore suits that cost more than my rent, their cologne cutting through the coffee-scented air like expensive smoke. They didn't look at menus, didn't look at their phones. They sat with the stillness of predators waiting for prey. "Table 7 needs water," Paolo called from the kitchen, his voice tight. I grabbed the pitcher, my reflection warping in its metallic surface. 26 years old, dark hair pulled back, apron slightly crooked. I looked like what I was, a graduate student working nights to fund a linguistics PhD nobody understood and even fewer people cared about. Table 7 was in the corner, furthest from the door. 4 men. 3 of them blurred together in my memory now, interchangeable muscle in expensive fabric. But the 4th man made my hand shake just enough that water sloshed onto the tray. He sat with his back to the wall, dark eyes scanning the room with the methodical precision of someone mapping exits. His suit was charcoal, perfectly tailored, and he wore it like armor. Black hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Carrara marble, all sharp angles and aristocratic severity. Mid-30s, maybe. Hard to tell when someone looked like they'd been born without the capacity for softness. I approached the table, my heart doing something stupid in my chest. "Water?" My voice came out steady. "Small mercies." He looked at me then, and I felt it like a physical thing, his attention dragging across my face with an intensity that made me want to step back and lean closer simultaneously. "Leave the pitcher." His voice was low, accented. Not Italian-American like most of the neighborhood. Something older, deeper. Sicilian, maybe. I set it down, careful not to meet his eyes again. "Anything else?" Privacy. I turned to leave, but voices from the booth behind them stopped me. 2 men, Americans, loud and careless in the way people are when they think waitresses are furniture. "Telling you," Rossi's getting impatient. "If your boss can't deliver the shipment routes by Friday, the whole deal's dead." I kept walking, but my mind snagged on the words. Shipment routes, deal. The way they'd said boss like it was a title, not a job description. Behind me, the dark-eyed man spoke in rapid Italian, too fast for me to catch more than a few words. But the tone was clear, controlled fury wrapped in silk. I made it back to the counter, started wiping down the espresso machine with hands that suddenly wanted to tremble. Paolo had disappeared into the back. The cafe felt too quiet despite being full, like everyone was holding their breath. The Americans in the booth stood abruptly, chairs scraping. One of them, balding, expensive watch catching the light, raised his voice. "We're not idiots, Santoro. You think we don't know what happened in Palermo? Your family's losing ground, and Rossi knows it. Maybe it's time to... Attento a cum parli." The dark-eyed man's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Watch how you speak." The temperature dropped 10 degrees. I shouldn't have been listening. Should have gone to the back, hidden in the kitchen until whatever this was finished playing out. But my feet stayed rooted to the floor, and my hands kept moving mechanically across the stainless steel. The American laughed, ugly and sharp. "What, you gonna threaten me in Italian? We're in New York, not your grandfather's village. You want Rossi's network? You play by American rules. Your American rules are why the shipment was compromised." The dark-eyed man stood now, and I could see the full effect of him, 6'2", maybe 6'3", built like someone who'd learned violence young and perfected it over time. 3 containers lost because your cretino in New Jersey couldn't keep his mouth shut. The American's face went red. "You calling John a rat?" "I'm calling him dead if he talks to the wrong people." The words hung in the air like smoke. Dead. Casual as discussing the weather. My hand slipped, the rag catching the edge of a cup. It shattered against the tile floor, ceramic exploding in a burst of sound that made every head turn, including his. Our eyes met across the cafe, and for a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in that dark gaze. Not anger. Assessment. Like he was cataloging me, filing me away in whatever mental database powerful men keep of potential problems. Then the Americans were moving, crowding him, and I crouched to pick up the broken ceramic with shaking hands. "Stai attenta," Paolo whispered from the kitchen doorway. "Be careful. Those men." I know. I didn't. Not really, but I knew enough. Knew that the prickling awareness crawling up my spine meant danger. Knew that I should keep my head down and my mouth shut. But then the Americans switched tactics, one of them pulling out his phone, speaking rapid English laced with casual threats about making calls and alternative arrangements, and I heard the dark-eyed man Santoro, they'd called him, respond in Italian again, his accent thickening with frustration. Only it wasn't quite Italian. It was Siciliano, the old dialect, Western Sicilian, specifically the kind my grandmother spoke, the kind I'd spent 2 years studying because nobody else in my program understood it was dying, being swallowed by mainland Italian and time. And suddenly, helplessly, I understood every word. The Americans didn't. They thought he was just posturing, throwing around Italian to intimidate them. But he was speaking to his men, low and urgent, and he was saying, "You, scrusciu e nefamatu, amazatilu dopu. The American is a traitor. Kill him later." The ceramic cut into my palm. Blood welled, bright and red. And when I looked up, Santoro was staring directly at me, his eyes narrow and his expression transformed into something that made my blood run cold. He knew that I'd understood. I ran. Not obviously, I wasn't stupid enough to sprint for the door, with my apron still on and blood dripping from my hand. But I abandoned the broken ceramic, mumbled something to Paolo about the bathroom, and walked with forced calm toward the back hallway. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked pale, eyes too wide. I ran cold water over the cut on my palm, watching pink swirl down the drain while my mind raced. Uscruciu infamatu, amazatilu dopu. I'd understood him, and he'd seen me understand. Which meant what? That I was now a liability? A witness to... what, exactly? A conversation in a language most people didn't even know existed anymore? My hands shook as I wrapped paper towels around the cut. Through the bathroom door, I could hear the cafe muted voices, chair legs scraping, the hiss of the espresso machine, normal sounds, but nothing felt normal anymore. I forced myself to breathe. I was overreacting. Probably. I'd heard crime talk, sure, but I heard crime talk every week in this neighborhood. Half the regulars at Marcello's had connections to something. It was Little Italy or what was left of it. You learn to ignore certain conversations, to develop selective deafness. This felt different. When I emerged from the bathroom, Paolo grabbed my arm. His face was gray. "Go home," he whispered. "I'll close alone. It's only 9. Go home, Julia." The use of my full name instead of Jules made my stomach drop. Paolo never used my full name. I nodded, untying my apron with numb fingers. The cafe had emptied. All the booths that had been full 20 minutes ago now stood vacant, abandoned espresso cups leaving dark rings on the wooden tables. No sign of Santoro or his men. No sign of the Americans. Just silence and the smell of coffee and something else, something metallic and wrong that might have been my imagination. I grabbed my coat from the back, my backpack with its collection of linguistic textbooks and half-finished translations. Paolo pressed an envelope into my hands. 2 weeks' pay, he said. "Don't come back, Paolo. My cousin owns the building. I got a call." His voice cracked. "They asked about you, who you are, how long you've worked here." The envelope trembled in my grip. "Who asked?" But I knew. I already knew. "Go to your apartment. Get what you need. Go somewhere else. Stay with friends. Your parents, maybe." "My parents are in Arizona." "Good." Paolo's eyes were wet. "Julia, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know they'd..." He stopped, swallowed hard. "Just go." I went. The November air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp with the threat of rain. I walked fast, head down, cutting through side streets I knew by heart. My apartment was 12 blocks away, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned decades ago. I kept checking over my shoulder, kept seeing shadows that looked like men in expensive suits. By the time I reached my building, I'd almost convinced myself I was being paranoid. Almost. Then I saw the car. Black Mercedes, pristine and utterly out of place on this street of rusted Hondas and delivery vans. Parked directly in front of my building, engine running, windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. I stopped walking. My keys dug into my palm, the cut one, making me wince. "Run," my instincts screamed. "Run now." But where? I had $70 in my checking account, a maxed-out credit card, and a life that fit entirely within these 12 blocks. Run where? The car door opened. He stepped out like something from a nightmare dressed in tailored wool. Santoro. Even taller than I'd thought. His presence, somehow, larger on the empty street than it had been in the cafe. The streetlight caught the planes of his face, turning him into something carved from shadow and sharp edges. We stared at each other across 15 feet of cracked pavement. Julia Romano. My name and his accent sounded like a judgment. Linguistics PhD candidate, Columbia University. Specialization in dyeing, Romance languages, and Sicilian dialectology. My throat closed. He'd looked me up. In less than an hour, he'd found everything. You live alone, he continued, taking a step toward me. Parents in Scottsdale. No siblings, no boyfriend. No one who would notice if you disappeared. I should have run, should have screamed, should have done anything except stand there frozen while he approached with the careful, deliberate movements of a predator trying not to spook prey. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and bergamot, and something darker. Something that reminded me of my grandmother's warnings about men who smiled with their mouths but never their eyes. Only he wasn't smiling. Quanta nu hai? How old are you? The question in Siciliano in the Western dialect, the one from Trapani province, shocked me into answering. 26, and you speak like you were born in Marsala. His eyes narrowed. How? My grandmother. The words came out steady, surprising me. She was from Trapani. She taught me before she died. Something flickered across his face. Not quite emotion, but close. What was her name? Caterina Amato. He went very still. Amato from Trapani. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. For a long moment, he just looked at me. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust and the distant Hudson. Somewhere a siren wailed. New York sounds, familiar and safe. Except nothing felt safe anymore. Get in the car, he said finally. No. His eyebrow lifted, the first genuine expression I'd seen on his face. No? I'm not. Getting in a car with someone who orders executions in dead languages. A pause. Then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. Smart. He reached into his jacket. I tensed, but he only pulled out a phone. Tapped something, showed me the screen. A photo. Black and white, old. 2 families standing in front of a stone building, mountains visible in the background. And there, in the front row, that's my nonna, I whispered. And that, he indicated a young man in the back, barely 20, serious-faced and sharp-eyed, is my grandfather. Our families knew each other, in Sicily, a lifetime ago. Get in the car, he repeated, softer now. We need to talk about what you heard, and what it means that you're the only person outside my family who speaks that dialect. This time, against every instinct screaming at me to run, I got in the car. The interior of the Mercedes smelled like leather and danger. Santoro slid into the seat beside. Me not across. I noticed with a spike of anxiety, but right next to me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The driver, a thick-shouldered man who didn't turn around, pulled smoothly into traffic. Where are we going? My voice sounded small in the enclosed space. Somewhere we can talk without being overhead. Santoro pulled out his phone, typed something. You're not in danger from me, if that's what you're worried about. You literally ordered someone's death 2 hours ago. I ordered a traitor's execution. He said it like there was a difference. 3 of my men are dead because he sold information to a rival family. That's not murder, Miss Romano. That's justice. The casual way he said it made my skin crawl. I don't want to be involved in this. You became involved the moment you understood what I said. He pocketed his phone, turned to face me fully. Do you know what Siciliano is worth? Real Siciliano, not the tourist version they teach in language apps. It's a dying dialect. It's a security system. His eyes held mine, dark and intense. My family has used it for 4 generations, to communicate in front of law enforcement, rivals, anyone, because nobody speaks it anymore. Nobody understands it. Except me. Except you. He leaned back, studying me with an expression I couldn't read, which presents a problem. My heart hammered against my ribs. So you're going to, what? Kill me for knowing a language my grandmother taught me? If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. I want to understand who you are, why a Columbia PhD candidate is slinging coffee in Little Italy, why you chose to study the one dialect that could get you killed. The car turned onto the West Side Highway, Manhattan's lights streaking past the windows. We were heading downtown. My dissertation is on linguistic extinction patterns in Sicilian dialects, I said, focusing on the facts because facts felt safer than fear. I'm documenting variations before they disappear completely. My nonna was my primary informant before she died. The cafe job pays rent while I do field research. Field research in New York? There's a community in Bensonhurst. Older speakers, mostly. I've been recording interviews, mapping phonetic variations. I stopped. Why does any of this matter? He didn't answer immediately. The car pulled off the highway, navigating through streets that grew progressively quieter, darker. We were in the meatpacking district, but not the trendy part. The part where warehouses still looked like warehouses. The car stopped in front of a building that might have been a factory once. No lights, no signs, nothing to indicate it was anything but abandoned. Out, Santoro said. Every self-preservation instinct I had screamed not to follow him. But I thought about Paolo's face. The 2 weeks' pay pressed into my hands. The way he'd said, "Don't come back." I thought about the Mercedes parked outside my apartment. About how thoroughly Santoro had researched me in less than an hour. I thought about how I didn't really have a choice. The building's interior contradicted its exterior completely. Where the outside was decay, the inside was polished concrete and expensive minimalism. Track lighting, modern furniture, art that probably cost more than my education. Sit. Santoro gestured to a leather sofa while he moved to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of something amber. I sat, my backpack clutched in my lap like a shield. He handed me a glass, sat in the chair across from me, not beside me this time. I noticed, giving me space. Maybe, or just getting a better angle to watch me. "That photo I showed you," he said. "My grandfather, Salvatore Santoro, and your grandmother were part of the same village network in Trapani. He left Sicily in 1968. She left 2 years later. She never talked about it. I took a sip of the drink whiskey. Smooth and expensive. Just taught me the language. Songs, prayers, stories. She was smart." He swirled his glass, watching the light catch in the liquid. The old families, the ones who came over in the 60s and 70s, they knew to forget, to assimilate, to bury the old ways. But you didn't. My family couldn't afford to. He looked at me then, and for the first time I saw something unguarded in his expression. Weariness, maybe. Or the weight of something inherited and inescapable. "Do you know what my grandfather did in Trapani?" I shook my head. He mediated disputes. Land conflicts, family vendettas, business disagreements. He was what they called a mediatore, someone both sides trusted to find solutions. Santoro leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He brought that here. Built a network based on the old rules. Honor, family, silence. The Mafia, I said quietly. That's what Americans call it. He didn't flinch from the word. We call it Cosa Nostra, our thing. And yes, it's violent, it's criminal, it's everything you've seen in movies. But it's also structure, rules, a way of surviving in a world that doesn't want people like us to exist. People like you. People like our grandparents. He corrected. Immigrants with nothing. Sicilians who were treated like dirt in mainland Italy, and worse here. My grandfather built something from nothing. I inherited it. The way he said inherited sounded like a prison sentence. I set my glass down, my hands steadier now. Why are you telling me this? Because you're a problem I don't know how to solve. Brutal honesty, his eyes locked on mine. I can't let you walk away knowing what you know. But I can't. He stopped, something shifting in his expression. Your grandmother, Caterina. What did she tell you about Sicily? Stories, I said. About the village, the festivals, the sea. Did she ever mention why she left? I thought back to childhood afternoons in her kitchen, her hands kneading bread while she spoke in the old language, teaching me words nobody else in my family wanted to learn. She said she left to find freedom, I said slowly. That Sicily was beautiful but suffocating, that she needed air. Santoro nodded, something sad flickering across his face. My grandfather said the same thing, that he came to America to breathe. Did he? He died at 53. Heart attack during a negotiation with the Russians. He finished his drink in one swallow. So no, I don't think he did. The silence stretched between us, heavy with family ghosts and inherited burdens. Finally he stood. I need you to do something for me." Here it was, the trap closing. "What?" "Teach me," he said. "Properly, the way your grandmother taught you. The pronunciation, the idioms, the things that can't be found in books. I need to speak it the way she did." I stared at him. "You already speak it." "I speak it like someone who learned from recordings and old men who half remember." He moved closer, intensity radiating from him like heat. "I need to speak it like it's alive. Because right now, it's the only advantage I have. And advantages keep people alive in my world. And if I say no, you won't. Not a threat, a certainty. Because you're a linguist who dedicated years to preserving a dying language, and I'm offering you a native speaker to work with. Because you need money and I'll pay you whatever your university stipend is, times 10. And because," he stopped, something unreadable crossing his face. "Because," I prompted. "Because I think Caterina Amato sent you to me," he said quietly. "And I don't ignore signs from the dead. I didn't go home that night. Santoro had someone collect my things from the apartment: toothbrush, laptop, enough clothes for a week. The someone was a woman named Lucia, 40-something and terrifying, who moved through my apartment with the efficiency of someone conducting a military operation. You'll stay at the safe house, Santoro had said, not asked, until we sort out the situation with Rossi's people. What situation? The one where they saw you in the cafe, where they might wonder what you understood. He'd looked at me with those dark, assessing eyes. You're not going back to your life until I'm certain you're not a target. So I'd been installed in a brownstone in Carroll Gardens, given a bedroom that cost more to furnish than my entire apartment, and told to rest. I didn't rest. I paced. The house was beautiful in an intimidating way, all original molding and restored hardwood. Furniture that looked antique but was probably just expensive. Lucia stayed somewhere on the first floor. I heard her moving around, talking in low tones on the phone in Italian that was too fast for me to follow. By 3 a.m., I was sitting at the bedroom's desk, my laptop open, trying to make sense of what my life had become in the span of 6 hours. I pulled up my dissertation files, the recordings I'd made of Sicilian, speakers in Bensonhurst, elderly voices talking about the old country, about traditions their children had abandoned, about a language dying in real time. Then I opened a new document and started typing everything I could remember about Santoro's speech patterns. The way he pronounced certain vowels, the archaic verb forms he used, the vocabulary choices that marked him as Western Sicilian, probably Trapani province, possibly even the same village as my nonna. It was research. That's what I told myself. Just research. Not the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about the weariness in his voice when he'd talked about his grandfather, about inheritance and breathing and dying at 53. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Sleep. We start at 9. As I stared at the message. How did he know I was awake? I got up, moved to the window. Across the street, partially hidden in shadow, sat the black Mercedes. He was having me watched. Something between anger and something else, something more dangerous flared in my chest. I texted back. I don't take orders well. The response came immediately. I noticed. Sleep anyway. Despite everything, I smiled. He arrived at exactly 9 a.m., carrying coffee and a leather portfolio. I'd managed 3 hours of sleep, showered in a bathroom with heated floors, and dressed in the clothes Lucia had retrieved, jeans and a sweater that felt inadequate against the intensity of Santoro's presence in the brownstone's dining room. You look tired, he observed, setting the coffee in front of me. You look like you haven't slept in days. A pause, then that almost smile. Perceptive. He opened the portfolio, pulled out a stack of papers. Before we start the language work, you need to understand the current situation. Do I? If you're going to be in my world even temporarily, you need to know the rules. He spread the papers across the table, photographs, documents, things that looked disturbingly like dossiers. The man I was meeting with last night, the American, his name is David Kovacs. He works for the Rossi family. Works for? Is owned by. Santoro corrected. The Rossis control most of the port operations in New Jersey and parts of Brooklyn. They want to expand into territory my family has held for 3 generations. I picked up one of the photographs. Kovacs, the balding man from the cafe, standing next to someone who looked like a movie mobster, thick neck, gold chains, expensive suit, worn badly. Anthony Rossi, Santoro said. 2nd-generation Italian-American, who thinks he's Sicilian because his great-grandfather was from Naples. The contempt in his voice was sharp enough to cut. The shipment routes Kovacs mentioned, he continued. Are smuggling paths through the port. Medicine, mostly. Gray market pharmaceuticals from Europe. That's illegal. He looked at me like I'd said something adorable and stupid. Everything I do is illegal, Julia. The question is whether it's harmful. Semantics. Philosophy. He tapped another photo shipping containers. Manifests with official stamps. These medicines cost 10 times as much in America as they do in Europe. Same formula, same manufacturer. The only difference is patent law and corporate greed. I bring them in, sell them to community clinics at cost. People get insulin they can afford. I make enough to cover expenses. And the Rossies would rather control the supply, jack up prices, and pocket the difference. He pulled out another document, a coroner's report. 3 of my men died in a warehouse fire last week. The fire was set. Kovacs provided the intelligence that told Rossi's people where to strike. I set down the photograph, my coffee suddenly tasting like ash. The man you ordered killed. The traitor, Santoro corrected coldly. Who got 3 men with families burned alive for money? The brutality of it sat heavy in the room. What does this have to do with me? I asked quietly. Kovacs saw me look at you when you dropped that cup. He leaned back, arms crossed. If he mentions it to Rossi, if they start wondering why you mattered, they'll investigate. They'll find out what you study. They'll wonder if you understood things you shouldn't have. And then you become a liability they'll want to eliminate. The words hung between us, casual and terrifying. How long? My voice came out steadier than I felt. How long do I have to hide? Until I deal with Rossi. He said it like he was discussing grocery shopping. A week, maybe 2. And deal with means I remove the threat permanently. His eyes met mine, unflinching. This is what I am, Julia. What my family is. We don't call lawyers or file lawsuits. We solve problems the old way. I should have been horrified. Should have demanded he take me to the police, to the FBI, to anyone who represented law and order and civilization. Instead, I heard myself say, "Show me the recordings you've been using." To learn the dialect. He blinked, surprised. What? You said you learned from recordings and old men. I want to hear them, to understand what you're working with. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then he pulled out his phone, scrolled, handed it over. My nono, he said quietly, recorded 6 months before he died. I pressed play. An old man's voice filled the room, speaking Sicilian with the accent of someone who'd left Sicily but never truly departed. He was telling a story about fishing in Trapani as a boy, about the sea and the salt and the way the sun felt on the rocks. It sounded like my grandmother. I looked up to find Santoro watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Same village, I whispered. Same village, he confirmed. Same stories, same language, and suddenly the distance between us, criminal and civilian, killer and academic, felt less like a chasm and more like a thread pulled taut, connecting 2 people who'd inherited the same ghosts. Teach me, he said again, softer now. Help me speak it the way they did. I should have said no. I said yes. The lessons became a ritual. Every morning at 9, Santoro arrived with coffee always black for him, always a cappuccino for me, always from the same place in Bay Ridge where an old Sicilian woman named Rosa made them properly. We'd work for 3 hours in the brownstones' dining room, Lucia moving silently around us, the Mercedes parked outside like a metal guardian. He was a better student than I expected. Focused, relentless, absorbing pronunciation corrections, with the same intensity I imagined he brought to everything else. When I explained the difference between Western and Eastern Sicilian vowel shifts, he made me repeat examples until he could replicate them perfectly. Again, he'd say, listening to me speak, you skekyu. I'd repeat, the donkey. He'd mimic the exact intonation, the subtle glottal stop, the way the vowels compressed. Then he'd record himself, play it, back, adjust. Perfectionist didn't begin to cover it. But what surprised me more was what happened in the margins, the moments between grammar lessons and vocabulary drills, when he'd lean back, coffee in hand, and ask questions that had nothing to do with linguistics. Why Columbia? He asked on the 3rd day. Best linguistics department on the East Coast. I was correcting his written exercises, marking where he'd used modern Italian constructions instead of Sicilian. Plus I could stay in New York. You like New York? I understand New York. I looked up. There's a difference. He studied me with those dark eyes that always seemed to see more than I wanted to reveal. You understand things most people miss. That's just observation. I'm trained to notice linguistic variations. I'm not talking about language. He set his cup down, leaned forward. You noticed my men in the cafe before I sat down. You registered the Americans as a threat. You dropped that cup at the exact moment to break the tension in the room. That was an accident. Nothing you do is an accident. He said it with certainty. You're careful. Controlled. You analyze before you act. It felt too accurate, too seen. I shifted the papers between us. We should get back to... My nonno used to say that the best mediatori were the ones who could read a room in 3 seconds. Santoro's voice went soft, distant. That you had to see the truth people were hiding before they realized they were hiding it. Is that what you do? It's what I'm supposed to do. He picked up his pen, spun it between his fingers, nervous energy in someone who otherwise held himself with absolute control. Be the mediator. The one both sides trust. The one who finds solutions. But New York isn't Trapani in 1968. The pen stilled. The old rules don't always apply, and sometimes the only solution is violence. The weight in his voice made me look up. He was staring at the papers on the table without seeing them, his jaw tight. The 3 men who died, I said quietly. You knew them. I grew up with Marco. His son just turned 6. He looked at me then, and the grief in his eyes was raw and unguarded. Luca was supposed to get married next month, and Santo was my cousin. Oh, I'm sorry, I said, inadequate and true. Don't be sorry. He stood abruptly, moved to the window. Be smart enough to understand that this is my world, that people die, that I will kill Kovacs and probably others before this is finished, that you're sitting here teaching me grammar while I plan executions. The brutal honesty should have terrified me, should have sent me running. Instead, I stood, moved to stand beside him at the window, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. My nonna had a scar, I said, on her left hand, between her thumb and forefinger. I asked her about it once when I was 12. He glanced at me waiting. She said she got it in Trapani when she was 16. That there was a man who thought he could take what he wanted from women in the village. That one night he tried with her, and she stabbed him with a fishing knife. Santoro went very still. She said the local mediatore made it disappear. The body, the blood, any evidence. She said he told her grandfather that some men only understand one kind of justice. I looked up at him. She said the mediatore's name was Salvatore Santoro. The silence stretched taut between us. My grandfather never told me that story, he said finally, his voice rough. Maybe he knew she'd tell it to the right person eventually. We stood there, 6 inches apart, the morning light cutting across his face in sharp angles. I could see the exhaustion he hid, the weight he carried, the cost of being born into a world he'd never chosen. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. What did you expect? Someone who'd run, who'd be too afraid or too moral or too smart to stay. His eyes searched mine. Someone who wouldn't look at me like I'm still human. My heart did something complicated in my chest. You are still human. Debatable. But his mouth curved, almost a smile. The philosophers would argue. The philosophers didn't grow up in Trapani watching their grandfather mediate blood feuds. I interrupted. They didn't inherit a world built on violence and honor and impossible choices. You understand too much, he said, and it sounded like an accusation and a confession. Or maybe you're used to people not understanding at all. The distance between us felt charged, dangerous. I could smell his cologne, see the faint scar on his jaw that I'd never noticed before, feel the pull of something that had nothing to do with linguistics or safety or logic. He lifted his hand, stopped inches from my face. I shouldn't, then don't. But neither of us moved away. His phone shattered the moment, buzzing with brutal insistence. He stepped back, pulled it out, and I watched his expression transform into something cold and lethal. What is it? I asked. Rossi. He was already moving toward the door, texting rapidly. He knows you exist. He's asking questions. My blood went cold. How? Kovacs talked before he died. Mentioned a woman at the cafe who reacted wrong. He looked at me, and the man who'd been almost vulnerable seconds ago had vanished, replaced by someone carved from ice and fury. You need to disappear. Today. Lucia will take you somewhere safe. Where are you going? To have a conversation with Anthony Rossi. He pulled on his coat, checked a gun I hadn't realized he was carrying, and to make sure he understands that you're under my protection. Santoro. He stopped at the door, looked back. My name is Dante. Then he was gone, and I was left standing in the empty room with the ghost of his almost touch, still warming my skin. Lucia drove like she was being chased. We'd left the brownstone within 15 minutes of Dante's departure. My hastily packed bag thrown in the trunk of a different car, a nondescript Honda that blended into traffic like water. Where are we going? I asked as we merged onto the BQE. Upstate. Lucia's eyes never left the mirrors. There's a house in the Catskills. Off the grid. No digital footprint. You'll be safe there. For how long? As long as it takes. Which told me nothing and everything. We drove in silence for an hour. The city giving way to suburbs. Then to the bare trees and gray skies of late autumn in the Hudson Valley. My phone sat in my lap. Useless Lucia had made me turn it off. Remove the SIM card. You care about him, Lucia said suddenly. I looked at her. She was older than I'd initially thought, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of face that had seen things nobody should see. I barely know him. That's not what I asked. I watched the landscape blur past. Does it matter? It matters because men like Dante don't let people in. She navigated around a semi, her hands steady on the wheel. His nonno raised him to be the next mediatore. Taught him that attachment was weakness, that caring got people killed, that the family came first, always. That sounds lonely. It kept him alive. She glanced at me. Until you... I stopped, because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. It's just language lessons. Keep telling yourself that. Lucia's smile was sharp. But I've worked for the Santoro family for 20 years, and I've never seen Dante look at someone the way he looks at you. My chest tightened. How does he look at me? Like you're the first real thing in a world made of shadows. The safe house was a cabin that probably looked charming in summer but seemed haunted in November. All dark wood and windows that reflected bare branches, isolated enough that the nearest neighbor was invisible through the trees. Lucia did a sweep of the property, checking locks and sight lines, with professional efficiency. There's food in the kitchen, firewood stacked on the porch. Don't go outside unless necessary. Don't turn your phone on. Don't contact anyone. What if something happens? She handed me a different phone basic, probably untraceable. This has one number programmed in. Use it only for emergencies. Then she was gone, and I was alone with silence and the sound of wind in the pines. I lasted 3 hours before I broke. Not the rules about going outside or contacting people, but the rule about staying calm, staying rational, staying separate from whatever was happening back in the city with Dante and Rossi and the violence he'd promised. I called the emergency number. It rang once. What's wrong? Dante's voice, sharp with concern. Nothing. I stopped, gripped the phone tighter. Is it done? With Rossi? A pause. You called the emergency line to check on me? You said you were going to have a conversation? Conversations with you seem to involve guns. Sometimes. I heard something in the background, traffic maybe. I'm fine. The conversation was productive. Meaning, Rossi understands that you're off limits, that touching you would start a war he can't win. A car door slammed. You're safe, Julia. Relief and something else flooded through me. When can I come back? Few more days. I need to make sure his people got the message. And if they didn't, then I'll send a clearer one. Matter of fact. Terrifying. I moved to the window, watched darkness settling over the trees. Dante? Yes, thank you, for protecting me. Silence on the line, then quieter. You shouldn't thank me for fixing a problem I created. You didn't create this. I put you in danger the moment I spoke Sicilian in that cafe. His voice roughened. I should have been more careful. Should have known someone might understand. You couldn't have known. I should have. He exhaled, sharp. My nonno used to say that carelessness in our world doesn't get forgiven. It gets punished. Usually with blood. The weight in his words made my throat tight. You're not your grandfather. No. A bitter laugh. He was better at this. More ruthless. More willing to make the hard calls without. He stopped. Without what? Another pause. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped lower, intimate despite the distance. Without caring about collateral damage. I'm not collateral damage. You're a linguistic student who should be working on your dissertation. Not hiding in a cabin because a mafia boss decided to speak in a dead language around the wrong person. The self-recrimination in his voice cut. You should hate me. I should, I agreed. But I don't. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Why? He finally asked. Because you looked at me like I was real. Because you grieve for the men you lost. Because you carry your grandfather's legacy like a crown of thorns and never complain about the weight. Because you brought me coffee, I said instead. Every morning. The kind my nana would have approved of. A soft sound that might have been a laugh. That's a terrible reason to trust someone. Then I'm terrible at self-preservation. No. Definite now. You're too smart for your own good. Too brave. He stopped again. And I heard something shift in his breathing. I should let you go. You need to rest. I'm not tired. Liar. Says the man who hasn't slept in days. How did you... He paused. The circles under my eyes. And the way you held your coffee cup, like you needed it to stay vertical. Too observant, he murmured. It's dangerous. How much you see. So is what I feel when you look at me. The words escaped before I could stop them, honest and reckless. The silence stretched so long I thought the connection had died. Then, Betta, he said softly. Beautiful. Don't say things like that when I'm 2 hours away and can't. Can't what? Can't make sure you understand what you'd be choosing. His voice dropped to something raw. I'm not a good man, Julia. I've killed. I'll kill again. My world is blood and secrets and violence. I know. You know the theory, not the reality. Then show me the reality. I pressed my palm against the cold window glass. When I come back, no more half-truths or careful distance. Show me who you really are. And if you run, then you'll know I wasn't strong enough for this. My reflection stared back from the dark glass, eyes too bright. But I don't think I'll run. He made a sound, half groan, half laugh. You're going to destroy me. Or save you. Same thing, maybe. A breath. Go to sleep, Betta. I'll call tomorrow. Dante? Yes? Don't get killed doing something stupid and noble. No promises. But I heard the smile in his voice. Good night, Julia. The line went dead. I stood at the window for a long time after, watching my breath fog the glass, feeling something dangerous and inevitable taking root in my chest. Somewhere in the city, a killer was protecting me, and I was falling for him. The call came at 2 a.m., 4 days into my isolation. Not from Dante. From Lucia, her voice tight with something between fury and fear. Get dressed. Someone's coming for you. I bolted upright, heart slamming. What? There's a leak. Someone in Dante's organization told Rossi where you are. I heard an engine. Speed. I'm 40 minutes out. You need to hide. Now. The line died. I moved on instinct. No time for panic. Grabbed the emergency phone, my laptop, the bag Lucia had packed, killed the lights, moved to the back of the cabin where a window overlooked the tree line. In the distance, maybe half a mile out, I saw headlights cutting through the darkness. 2 cars. Coming fast. I ran. The November woods were skeletal and hostile, branches catching my clothes, roots trying to trip me. I'd thought to grab a flashlight but didn't dare use. The beam would give me away faster than footsteps. Behind me, I heard car doors slam. Voices. Men spreading out to search. I kept moving deeper into the trees, my breath coming in ragged gasps, terror making me clumsy. The laptop bag banged against my hip. My phone, the emergency one, pressed against my palm like a talisman. I should call Dante. Should tell him what was happening. But what could he do from 2 hours away except listen to me die? A flashlight beam swept through the trees to my left. Close. Too close. I dropped behind a fallen log, pressing myself into the dead leaves and mud, trying to become invisible. The cold soaked through my jeans immediately, but I didn't move, didn't breathe. Footsteps approached, stopped. Anything? A voice, rough and American. Nothing. You checked the north side? Yeah. She's not there. They moved on and I waited until the footsteps faded before letting myself breathe again. My phone vibrated. Text from Lucia. Where are you? I typed. Back coordinates from memory. We'd studied a map of the property my first day here. Lucia's response came immediately. Stay hidden. Dante's coming. Which meant he'd been called. Which meant he was probably driving like a maniac and about to do something catastrophically violent. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like hope. I moved again, circling wide through the woods, trying to put distance between myself and the searchers. My hands were numb, my jacket inadequate against the November cold. But I kept moving, kept silent, kept breathing. Then I heard it. A new engine, different from the others. Closer to the road. The black Mercedes, and gunfire. The sound cracked through the night like breaking bones, sharp, brutal, final. 3 shots, then silence so complete it felt suffocating. I should have stayed hidden. Should have waited for Lucia or the police or someone sane. I ran toward the sound. The cabin clearing was chaos. One of the cars that had been chasing me sat with its doors open, empty. The other was a wreck of shattered glass and bullet holes, and in the center of it all stood Dante. He had a gun in each hand, his suit jacket discarded, white shirt stark against the darkness. 2 bodies lay motionless near the wrecked car. A third man knelt on the ground, hands raised, blood streaming from his shoulder. Dante's expression was something from nightmares, cold, empty, merciless. "Who sent you?" His voice could have frozen blood. "Go to hell," the kneeling man spat. Dante moved faster than I could track, pistol whipping the man across the face with casual violence. Wrong answer. "Who sent you?" "Rossi." The man choked on blood. "Rossi paid us. Said the girl was worth 50 grand. "And who told Rossi where to find her?" Silence. Dante pressed the gun against the man's temple. "Last chance." "I don't know. Rossi got a call. Said he had a location." The man's voice cracked. "Please, I got kids." "So did the men your boss burned. Alive." Dante's finger moved to the trigger. "Stop." The word escaped me before I could think. Every head turned. Dante's eyes found mine across the clearing, and I watched something break in his expression, the cold killer mask fracturing into shock and fury and fear. "Gesù Cristo, Julia." He moved toward me, weapons still drawn. "I told you to hide. You were going to execute him. He was hunting you." Dante grabbed my arm with his free hand, checking me for injuries with terrified efficiency. "Did they touch you? Did anyone?" "I'm fine." I pulled back, looked at the kneeling man, at the bodies. "But you can't just kill." "I can and I will." He stepped between me and the hired gun, a wall of lethal protection. "These men were paid to kidnap or kill you. They don't get mercy. He has children. He should have thought of that before taking money to hunt an innocent woman." Dante's voice went flat, final. "This is my world, Julia. This is what I am, what I have to be, to keep people safe." I looked at him, really looked. At the blood spatter on his shirt, at the bodies he'd made with those elegant hands, at the gun that hadn't wavered once from the kneeling man's skull. This was the reality, not language lessons over coffee, not almost touches in brownstone dining rooms, not phone calls where he said beta like a prayer. This. Violence and death and choices that left blood on expensive shoes. "If you pull that trigger," I said quietly, "I won't stop you, but I need you to know that I'm watching, that I see you, that this choice, right now, is yours. Not your grandfather's legacy, not the family honor. Yours." He stared at me, the gun still pressed against the hired killer's head, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Then, slowly, he lowered the weapon. "Lucia," he called without looking away from me. "Take this piece of shit to the hospital. Make sure he understands what happens if he or Rossi come near her again." Lucia appeared from Tanang, the shadows when had she arrived, and hauled the bleeding man toward a car. Dante holstered his guns, closed the distance between us in 3 strides, and pulled me against his chest with enough force to steal my breath. "Kichu karu asai di loki me," he whispered against my hair. "More precious than my eyes. If they'd hurt you." They didn't. I wrapped my arms around him, feeling his heart hammering against my cheek. "You got here in time." "Barely." His hands fisted in my jacket. "There's a traitor in my organization. Someone who sold you out. Someone I trusted." I pulled back enough to see his face. The fury there could have scorched earth. "Then we find them," I said. "Together. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when someone put a price on my head." I met his eyes, steady despite the adrenaline still screaming through my veins. And when I decided I wasn't running from this, from you, something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to something raw and desperate. "You should run," he said hoarsely. You should get as far from me as possible. Probably. I reached up, touched the scar on his jaw I'd noticed days ago. But I'm terrible at self-preservation, remember? He caught my hand, pressed it harder against his face like he needed the contact to believe I was real. Beta. Show me, I whispered. You promised to show me who you really are. No more half-truths. You're looking at it. Bitter, broken. This is who I am. Someone who kills, who makes corpses, who... I kissed him. Not gentle, not careful. Desperate and reckless, my hands fisting in his shirt, his sharp intake of breath lost against my mouth. He froze for one shocked second. Then he was kissing me back with the intensity of a man dying of thirst, his hands in my hair, his body a wall of heat and barely controlled violence pressed against mine. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes were black in the darkness. This is a mistake, he said, against my lips. Definitely. You'll get hurt. Being close to me always ends in blood. Then we'll be careful. I don't know how to be careful with you. His forehead pressed against mine. You make me want impossible things. Like what? Like keeping you? Raw honesty. Like building something that isn't just survival and violence. Like believing I could be someone worth your trust. My chest ached. You already are. You don't know everything I've done. I know enough. I pulled back, made him look at me. I know you grieve. I know you protect. I know you're trying to be better than what you inherited. That's enough. He laughed, shaky and disbelieving. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, or the most foolish. Can't I be both? This time when he kissed me, it was softer. Reverent, like I was something holy instead of reckless. In the distance, sirens began to wail. We need to go, Dante murmured. Police will ask questions. What about the bodies? Lucia, we'll handle it. He kept his arm around me as we moved toward the Mercedes. This is what I meant about my world. Evidence disappears. Violence gets cleaned up. Everything happens in shadows. I understand. Do you? He opened the car door, his eyes searching mine. Because once you cross this line with me, there's no going back to coffee shops and dissertations. You'll be part of this. Part of my world. I thought about my grandmother's scar. About Salvatore Santoro making bodies disappear. About the inheritance we'd both received him violence. Me the language that named it. I crossed the line the moment I understood what you said in that cafe. I told him. Everything since has just been deciding whether to run forward or back. And? I got in the car. Forward. Always forward. He smiled, then really smiled. Beautiful, and dangerous, and true. Chu karu asai, he said again, and closed the door between me and the November cold. We didn't go back to the brownstone. Dante drove us to Manhattan, to a building in Tribeca that wore wealth like armor. Penthouse level, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city's glittering sprawl. Is this yours? I asked, stepping into space that looked like an architectural magazine, all clean lines and expensive emptiness. It's where I go when I need to think. He moved through the apartment, turning on minimal lighting, the glow soft enough to feel intimate. No one knows about this place except Lucia. Not even your family? Especially not my family. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed me one. My uncle thinks I should be more like my nonno, more ruthless, more willing to expand territory and start wars. But you're not. I've started plenty of wars. He took a long drink. Just more carefully than he'd like. The old generation sees hesitation as weakness. I moved to the windows, the city spreading below like fallen stars. And what do you see it as? Survival. He came to stand beside me, close, enough that I could feel his heat. My nonno died at 53. My father at 48. Heart attack during a negotiation. Stroke during a meeting. Both of them burned out trying to hold the family together through violence and willpower. You're trying to find another way. I'm trying not to die before 40. He set his glass down, with more force than necessary. The medicines I smuggle, the ones Rossi wants to control, they started because my father couldn't afford his heart medication. The pharmaceutical companies wanted 10 times what it cost in Europe. He chose between his health and keeping the family business afloat. Oh. He chose the business, I said quietly. Always. Dante's reflection in the window looked haunted. And when he died, I inherited an empire built on bodies, and a promise I made to myself. Find a way to make the violence mean something. To use what we are, what we do for something beyond just power. That's why the medicine smuggling. It's how I sleep at night. He turned to face me fully, knowing that the blood on my hands pays for insulin someone's grandmother can afford, for cancer medications, for treatments that shouldn't cost more than rent. The complexity of him stole my breath. Killer and healer, criminal and protector, man trying to redeem an inheritance written in violence. You're not what I expected, I said, echoing his words from days ago. What did you expect? A monster, maybe, or a man who justified everything with power and tradition. I touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. Not someone trying to be better while knowing they'll probably fail. I will fail. Certainty in his voice. The family will demand things. Rivals will push. I'll have to choose between the right thing and the safe thing. And I'll choose safety because that's what keeps people alive. Like tonight. Like tonight. He covered my hand with his. I would have killed that man without hesitation if you hadn't stopped me. Would you have regretted it? A pause. No. Which is what makes me dangerous. I should have pulled away. Should have recognized this for what it was, a confession of monstrosity wrapped in beautiful words. Instead, I kissed him again. This time it wasn't desperate or reckless. This time it was a choice made with open eyes, full knowledge of what I was accepting. He responded like I'd broken something in him, his control fracturing as he pulled me closer. His hands slid into my hair, tilted my head back, deepened the kiss until I couldn't think past the taste of him and whiskey and want. When he lifted me onto the counter when I hadn't noticed moving, I wrapped my legs around his waist and let myself fall into this dangerous thing between us. Tell me to stop, he breathed against my neck, his mouth tracing the line of my throat. Tell me you came to your senses. I don't want to. Betta. It came out ragged. I can't promise you safety, can't promise you normal, everything. I touched turns complicated and dangerous. Then I'll be complicated and dangerous too. I pulled his mouth back to mine, tasted his sharp exhale. Show me. All of it. The violence and the vulnerability. The man who kills and the man who grieves. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes, his own dark and wild and wanting. If we do this, you're mine. Under my protection. In my world. No going back. I know. The universities won't want you. The police will watch you. My enemies will use you against me. His hands framed my face, thumbs stroking my cheekbones. Your life will never be simple again. It stopped being simple the moment I understood Siciliano. Maybe. His smile was sharp and sad. Or maybe it stopped when you decided not to run. Same thing. He kissed me again. Slower this time. Like he was memorizing the shape of my mouth against his. Like he was branding this moment into memory before it could be taken away. There's a traitor, he said against my lips. Someone in my organization sold your location to Rossi. Until I find them, you're not safe. Then we find them together. This isn't your... Stop telling me what's my fight or not. I gripped his shirt, held him close. I'm in this now. With you. For whatever comes. He stared at me like I was something miraculous and terrifying. You're going to get your heart broken. Probably. Or killed. Less likely with you protecting me. I failed tonight. You got there in time. I kissed the corner of his mouth, his jaw, the pulse hammering in his throat. You saved me. Again. Kichukaru asai di lokime, he whispered, and I felt the weight of those words more precious than my eyes settle into my bones. If I lose you, you won't. You can't promise that. Neither can you. I pulled back, met his gaze steadily. But we can choose this anyway. Choose each other despite the danger. His hands tightened on my hips. That's the most reckless thing I've ever heard. Good thing I'm terrible at self-preservation. He laughed then, real and surprised and beautiful. Then he was kissing me again, and the city lights blurred beyond the windows, and I let myself fall completely into this impossible thing. Later, much later, we lay tangled together on his bed, the skyline painting shadows across bare skin. Tell me about the traitor, I said into the darkness. What do you know? His fingers traced idle patterns on my shoulder. Only 5 people knew where the safe house was. Lucia, my uncle Marco, my cousin Vincent, my second-in-command Antonio, and me. You trust Lucia. With my life. No hesitation. Your uncle? Has been trying to push me toward more aggressive expansion. Thinks I'm weak for not starting a full war with Rossi. His hand stilled. But he's family. Blood. Blood doesn't always mean loyal. In my world it's supposed to. Bitter. The first rule of Cosa Nostra family above everything. What about Antonio? 20 years with my family. Saved my life twice. He shifted, pulled me closer. I can't believe he'd betray me. That leaves Vincent. Silence. Your cousin, I prompted. Vincent's ambitious. Wants more responsibility, more territory. Dante's voice went flat. He's also my sister's son. If I accuse him and I'm wrong, you'll fracture the family. And if I'm right, I'll have to kill my nephew. The words hung heavy. There's no good outcome. I turned to face him in the darkness. Then we find proof. Real evidence. Something that makes the choice clear. And if the evidence points to Vincent, then you do what you have to do. I touched his face. But you don't have to do it alone. He pulled me against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. I don't know how to let someone in, how to share this burden. You start by trusting that I'm strong enough to carry it with you. You are. He pressed his lips to my hair. That's what terrifies me. We stayed like that as the tonight deepened. Two people from different worlds choosing each other despite every reason not to. Outside, the city glittered and burned, and somewhere in its shadows a traitor was planning their next move. The evidence came from an unexpected source. Dante's accountant, a nervous man named Frank, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, arrived at the penthouse at 7 a.m. with a folder of financial records. I'm sorry, Mr. Santoro, Frank said, spreading papers across the dining table. But you asked me to flag any unusual transactions. And this. He tapped a highlighted line. This is very unusual. I watched from the kitchen, coffee in hand, as Dante examined the documents with the focused intensity I'd come to recognize. Vincent. He said the name like a death sentence. He's been moving money to offshore accounts. Not just moving, Frank corrected nervously. Accepting payments. Large ones. From a shell corporation that, when I traced it, leads back to the Rossi family. The silence that followed felt like the moment before an execution. How long? Dante's voice was ice. 6 months. Maybe longer. Frank pulled out another document. And there's this phone records. Vincent called a number registered to one of Rossi's lieutenants 3 hours before the attack on the safe house. I set my coffee down. Moved closer. The evidence was damning dates, times, amounts that told a story of systematic betrayal. This is enough, Dante said quietly. More than enough. Frank gathered his papers with shaking hands. What do you want me to do with this? Nothing. I'll handle it. Dante stood, and I saw the transformation happen. The man who'd held me last night vanishing behind the mediatore who made impossible choices. Thank you, Frank. Send your bill to Lucia. When Frank left, Dante stood at the window staring out at the morning light like it held answers. What happens now? I asked. Now I call a family meeting. His reflection in the glass looked carved from stone. Present the evidence. Let Vincent explain. And then I do what my nonno would do. He turned to face me. What I have to do? I understood what he wasn't saying. You're going to kill him. He betrayed the family, sold you out, got 3 men murdered. No emotion in his voice. There's only one penalty for that. He's your nephew, which makes it worse. The first crack in his control. If it was anyone else, I could delegate. But Vincent is family. Blood. It has to be me. I moved to him, took his hands. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. You said I'm in this with you, that I'm yours. I gripped his fingers tighter. Then let me be there. Let me witness what this world demands. Julia, you don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking. I met his eyes. I'm asking to stand beside you when you do the hardest thing you've ever had to do. To be there so you don't carry it alone. His jaw worked. You'll hate me after. I won't. You'll see what I'm capable of. What I really am. I already know what you are. I touched his face. And I'm still here. He closed his eyes, leaned into my palm. Betta, this shouldn't be your burden. It became my burden when Vincent sold me to Rossi. I made him look at me. Let me be strong enough for this. For you. The war in his expression broke my heart. Finally he nodded. But you stay beside Lucia. You don't speak. You don't interfere. I won't. And if it becomes too much, if you need to leave, you go. No shame. No judgment. I won't leave. He pulled me against him, held me like I was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. I don't deserve you. Probably not. I breathed in his scent cedar and bergamot and the faint metallic tang of danger. But you have me anyway. The family meeting took place in a warehouse in Red Hook. Not the polished, renovated kind. The kind where ships used to unload cargo in the palace. 50s. Where blood could soak into concrete and disappear. Dante's uncle Marco was there. Thick-bodied and hostile. Antonio, the second in command, looking grim. Lucia by my side, her hand resting casually near the gun beneath her jacket. And Vincent, 28, handsome in the way dangerous men often are, with the Santoro dark eyes and the kind of charm that probably got him out of trouble his whole life. Until now. Dante arrived last, his presence transforming the space. Everyone stood straighter, quieter, as he walked to the center of the warehouse where a single chair waited. Vincent. His voice echoed off concrete. Sit. Vincent's eyes darted to the exits, to his uncle, to the other men. Dante, what's this about? Sit. The command in that word made Vincent obey. Dante pulled out the financial records, dropped them on a crate beside the chair. 6 months of payments from Rossi. Phone calls to his lieutenant. And this. He held up a final document, a recording of you, giving Rossi the location of the safe house where Julia was staying. The color drained from Vincent's face. You sold out the family, Dante continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. You got Marco, Luca, and Santo killed. You put an innocent woman's life in danger for money. I can explain, Vincent started. Don't. Dante moved closer. Don't insult me with lies. The evidence is absolute. Uncle Marco stepped forward. Dante, he's family. We can what? Dante turned on him. Forgive betrayal? Ignore 3 dead men? Pretend that family means anything if we don't enforce consequences? The warehouse went silent. Nano taught us one thing above all else, Dante said, looking around at the gathered men. That the family survives through loyalty, through trust, through knowing that betrayal has only one answer. He pulled out a gun, held it loosely at his side. Vincent started to shake. Please. Dante, please. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Dante's expression was empty of everything except cold judgment. And choices have consequences. I watched it happen like it was a movie, distant, surreal, impossible. Watched Dante raise the gun. Watched Vincent start to cry. Watched the family stand silent, bearing witness. And then, wait. My voice cracked through the warehouse. Every head turned. Lucia grabbed my arm, hissed a warning. But I pulled free, moved toward Dante. Wait. He stared at me like I'd struck him. Julia, get back. You promised, I said, stopping just out of reach. You promised to show me who you really are. The violence and the vulnerability. This is the violence. No. I shook my head. This is you doing what you think you have to do. What you've been taught. What the family demands. I took another step. But you told me you wanted to be different. To find another way. There is no other way. Then let's find one. I looked at Vincent, crying in the chair, then back at Dante. You said your nonno died, trying to hold the family together through violence. That your father did the same. Are you going to repeat their pattern? Or are you going to try something new? The gun in his hand trembled. He betrayed us, Dante said, his voice breaking. The law demands. Make a new law. I moved close enough to touch him now. Be the mediatore who finds solutions. Who builds something different. If I show mercy, I look weak. You look strong enough to choose compassion over tradition. I covered his hand with mine, the gun between our palms, strong enough to break the cycle. For an endless moment, we stood there, killer and civilian, inherited violence and chosen mercy, the weight of 4 generations pressing down on a single choice. Then Dante lowered the gun. Vincent. His voice was rough. You're out. Exiled. You take nothing. You leave New York. You never contact this family again. Vincent sobbed with relief. But if you ever speak about family business, if you contact Rossi, if you so much as breathe our name, Dante's eyes went dead. I will find you. And next time, no one will stop me. Uncle Marco started to protest. Dante silenced him with a look. The family survives through loyalty, Dante said, addressing everyone. But it survives through mercy too. Through knowing when to bend instead of break. My non-knows way built an empire, but it also killed him at 53. He looked at me then, something raw and grateful in his eyes. "I'm choosing a different way," he said. "Starting now." 3 weeks later, I stood in Dante's Tribeca apartment watching snow fall over Manhattan. The city looked clean under white, like winter could absolve sins and start fresh. I didn't believe it, but it was pretty to imagine. Behind me, Dante emerged from his study, phone in hand. "Rossi wants to meet." I turned from the window. "Is that safe?" "Probably not." He set the phone down, moved to stand beside me. "But the war's been escalating. His people hit one of our medicine shipments yesterday. We retaliated against his ports. If we don't find a solution, we're looking at full-scale violence. So you're going to mediate." "Trying to." He slipped an arm around my waist, pulled me against his side. "Be what my nano was, find the middle ground." I leaned into him, breathing in cedar and safety. "What are you offering?" "Territory split. He keeps New Jersey. I keep Brooklyn. We share the medicine routes, both take smaller profits, but avoid war." He rested his chin on top of my head. "It's not perfect, but it's survival. It's survival." He was quiet for a moment. "Vincent's in California." Lucia confirmed he's working construction, keeping his head down. "Any contact with Rossi?" "None." Dante's hand tightened on my hip. "You saved his life that day." "We saved his life." "No." He turned me to face him. "I would have killed him. Would have repeated every pattern my grandfather and father followed. You showed me there was another choice." I touched his face, feeling the familiar sharp angles. "You showed yourself. I just reminded you to look. Semantics." But he smiled. "My dangerous linguist. Your dangerous linguist who's 3 weeks behind on her dissertation. About that." He pulled away, moved to retrieve something from the desk. I made some calls. I took the envelope he handed me, suspicious. Inside was a letter from Columbia's linguistics department, an offer to fund my research. Full stipend, extended deadline, and a position as visiting scholar in Sicilian dialectology. I looked up. "Dante, this is what you deserve." He crossed his arms. "I can't give you safety, can't promise you normal, but I can make sure the work you love doesn't die because you got tangled up with a criminal." Tears stung my eyes. "This is too much. It's not enough." He moved closer. "You gave up your apartment, your job, your simple life. The least I can do is make sure you can still do the work that matters." I set the graft, let her down, threw my arms around him. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet." He held me tight. "The position requires you to document native Sicilian speakers for the university archive. And I'm volunteering." His voice rumbled against my ear. "Me, Lucia, Uncle Marco, everyone in the family who still speaks Siciliano. We'll be your informants." The brilliant audacity of it made me laugh. "You're giving me access to the Sicilian Mafia for academic research. I'm preserving my grandmother's language while giving my girlfriend a career." He pulled back, eyes serious. "And keeping you close, because the idea of you going back to coffee shops and being vulnerable makes me violent." "Your girlfriend?" I arched an eyebrow. "Unless you prefer the woman I'm dangerously in love with." My heart stopped, started again, faster. "You love me? Kichu karu asai de lo kime." He cupped my face in both hands. "More precious than my eyes, more necessary than breathing. You walked into my world and made me want to be better than what I inherited. Dante, I'm not good enough for you. I know that." His thumb stroked my cheekbones. "I'll do terrible things, make choices you'll hate, but I will spend every day trying to be someone worthy of your faith in me." I kissed him, tasting snow and promises, and the dangerous possibility of building something new from inherited ruins. "I love you too," I whispered against his mouth. "You terrifying, complicated, beautiful disaster of a man." He laughed, the sound surprised and joyful. "We're both disasters. Then we'll be disasters together." The meeting with Rossi happened 3 days later. I wasn't there, Dante had drawn that line firmly. But I waited in the penthouse, pretending to work on my dissertation while my stomach twisted with anxiety. When he finally came home at midnight, I searched his face for blood or bruises or signs of violence. Instead, I found exhausted triumph. "We have a deal," he said, collapsing onto the sofa. "Territory split, shared medicine routes, peace for at least a year." I sat beside him, took his hand. "You did it." "We did it." He pulled me against him. Rossi asked about you, actually. Should I be worried? He wanted to know if the woman who spoke Sicilian was real, or if I'd imagined her. Dante's smile was sharp. I told him you were very real and very off-limits. What did he say? That any woman brave enough to get involved with me deserved combat pay. He kissed my temple. He's not wrong. I settled into his embrace, listening to his heartbeat slow from battle-ready to something approaching peace. What happens now? I asked into the darkness. Now I try to build what my nonno couldn't. His hand traced patterns on my shoulder. A family business that's more than just survival, that uses what we are to help people. The medicine routes, and other things. Community programs, protection for people the system fails, using the network for good when we can. It's ambitious. It's probably impossible. He tightened his hold on me. But you make me believe in impossible things. Like what? Like redemption. Like building something worth inheriting. He paused. Like love surviving in a world made of violence. I turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability he only showed me. Love doesn't just survive violence, Dante. Sometimes it transforms it. Is that what we're doing? Transforming? We're trying. I kissed him softly. That's all anyone can do. Later, as we lay tangled in his bed with the city glittering beyond the windows, he spoke into the darkness. Ti voglio bene. I love you, in the old language. Ti voglio bene, I echoed. Always. The dissertation became something unexpected. Not just a documentation of dying dialects, but a study of how language preserves identity across generations. How words carry violence and healing both. How speaking in the old tongue could be an act of resistance against forgetting. I recorded hours of interviews with Dante and his family. Stories about Sicily, about immigration, about building lives in a world that wanted them invisible. The university loved it. Dante's family tolerated it. And I found my purpose somewhere between academia and the criminal underworld, preserving what was disappearing, documenting what couldn't be written in official histories. 6 months after that night in the warehouse, Dante and I stood in a small church in Carroll Gardens. Not getting married, we both knew that was still years away, if ever. But attending the christening of Antonio's new grandson, watching the family gather in celebration instead of violence. Look at you, I murmured to Dante, as he held the baby with surprising gentleness. Dangerous Mafia mediatore gone soft. Still dangerous, he corrected, but his smile was warm, just more carefully applied. Uncle Marco approached, his expression less hostile than it had been. The Rossi deal is holding. Port operations our way. Smooth. Good. Dante handed the baby back to Antonio. Any problems? Nothing we can't handle without bloodshed. Marco's eyes flicked to me. Your way is working. For now. It was as close to approval as we'd get. As the family gathered for the celebration meal, I watched Dante move among them, still lethal, still commanding, but tempered by something new. Hope, maybe, or the belief that patterns could be broken. He caught me staring, raised his glass in a silent toast. I raised mine back. Ti voglio bene, I mouthed. His smile could have lit the city. That night, back in the penthouse, I sat at my desk working while Dante read reports on the sofa. Julia, he said suddenly. If you could go back to that night in the cafe, knowing everything that would happen, would you still drop that cup? I looked up, met his eyes across the room. Yes, I said without hesitation. Every time. Even knowing the danger, the violence, everything you'd have to witness? Even then, I set down my pen. Because the alternative is a world where I never knew you, where your family's language died without being documented, where you kept trying to be your grandfather instead of yourself. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to my desk, pulled me into his arms. Chu karu asai di loki me, he whispered. You saved me. We saved each other. And in the end, maybe that was the truest thing. Two people from different worlds, brought together by a dying language and a moment of recognition. Building something new from inherited violence, choosing mercy over vengeance, love over fear. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and dangerous and complicated. But it was ours, and that made it worth every risk.